criminal organization known as LAF is targeting Captain Vassant, one of our military liaisons.
LAF.
I share the confusion, Sam. Another acronym for an organization in the MCU? Does this one stand for lazy as f***? Because that's what all this acronyming is starting to feel like.
I mean, you're complaining about acronyms being overused in the MCU, but do you know how many acronyms there are in real life? Yeah, just think about that for a second.
Sending intel to your HUD right now.
I love how tech in the MCU just works every time to send extremely complex data and audio despite loud environments or long distances.
Questioning futuristic technology in a fictional universe with said futuristic technology. That's almost as stupid as sending 3 acronyms for being too many acronyms.
Louis, c'est moi qui tuerai.
Did everyone brush up on all the previous Captain American films and bring your notes? Because we're barely 4 minutes in and we're already having to remember who the f*** Batroc is and why we should care.
Oh boy. So every time TV Sins does an MCU show, they sin it for having characters whom they don't remember. And these sins are stupid for multiple reasons. First, you do not have to remember exactly who this guy is to understand what's going on in this episode, because even a casual fan can see that he's taken an American hostage and Sam is trying to get him back. Second, you do not have the right to complain about the show including a lot of characters when you yourself are not invested enough to do any kind of research on those characters. Third, the MCU is so big at this point that you're kind of either on this train or you're not.
Okay, switching to plan B.
Fun fact, this is why everyone working at S.H.I.E.L.D. headquarters has to wear lead-lined clothing.
And skip.
I love how Red Wing just knows that engage means go use your genital laser to cut an exact hole out of this plane at a very specific door seam, with no further instruction.
Just because the show hasn't explicitly given you the answer to the sin does not make it a sin. I mean, for all we know, Sam could have programmed Red Wing to perform this task before they left the plane, or he could be controlling right now. There are any number of possible explanations that could make your point moot.
Laughing about a basic front flip when human life is on the line.
Alright, so I know this is a joke, but it's a really shitty one. Seriously, who laughed at this? Anyway, to make this sin even more stupid, humor is something that people in dangerous jobs, such as the military or police, use to cope with the shit they see. So, I don't understand why you're sinning this.
Still, the guys in these helicopters not being able to hit Sam even once is utter bullshit, and I will be sinning that.
I mean, have you ever tried to hit a small flying target while you are also flying? Through a fucking canyon, no less? Yeah, it's probably not the easiest job in the world.
Look, I don't have time to go all Mythbusters on this move and figure out the complexity of matching the 3-dimensional movement of 2 independent bodies, one of which has giant blades creating enough downforce to stay in flight. So let me just say, nope.
Oh, well, this is awkward, 'cause people actually do this in real life.
So the commander told Sam earlier on the plane they were already in restricted airspace, so why does Batroc think traveling into a different restricted airspace will make a difference?
According to airspace laws, certain regions have different restrictions on aircraft, so this is kinda bullshit.
Heads up, you're about to fly into Libyan airspace.
Not sure why this matters, because once again, the commander told Sam that they were already in restricted airspace. They're already committing all the illegals.
Not only did I just explain why that's not a sin, but this is also an example of Discount Jeremy double dipping by sinning the same thing twice.
How many choppers do these random terrorists have? We've seen at least 2 blown up, and this third is followed by a 4th loaded to the gills with missiles for a last-second tension builder. I'm just trying to figure out the plan here. Hijack a plane, take a hostage, and then was the plan always to jump from that plane, even though they had control of it? They had all the equipment to do so, but if Falcon never shows up, they just fly direct, right? But still, they have a flock of fully loaded choppers at the ready just in case? I mean, there's planning ahead, and then there's omniscience, and this feels more like the second.
Really? Dude, these are terrorists who have taken an American soldier hostage, and they're flying with said hostage. Having 4 heavily armed aircraft to protect you doesn't really seem that crazy to me in this situation.
Also, now is as good a time as any to remind you that Hawkfly abandoned an unmanned plane to just continue on its way flying over the desert. Sure, they showed us it went to autopilot, but that sucker was flying to Libya too, and it's never mentioned again, and I need to know how did they stop that plane?
As if the MCU has never had autopilot planes before. I mean, do you remember Spider-Man Homecoming? You sinned it. The point is, the MCU has clearly established that the proper technology exists within universe to make this possible.
So you're gonna make me ask, why didn't you take up the mantle?
Damn, it's almost not fair that Marvel can just bring in Don Cheadle off the bench for a few minutes and add this much gravitas to the proceedings. In fact, it's so not fair that instead of taking another sin off, I'm adding one for how not fair it is.
Discount Jeremy pads the sin count cliche.
Half hour before last call?
I can't, guys. I have to prep for tomorrow's session.
We've seen a lot of stories on the dangers of alcohol, but here we have a situation where going to get a drink would have saved a guy's life. I honestly can't say how I feel about that messaging, but I do appreciate the attempt to flip the storytelling norm.
A whole bunch of bullshit.
Sleeping on a hardwood floor. I said hardwood.
Discount Jeremy says boner.
You're a civilian now.
Maybe the show will explain how this is possible. Maybe it won't. But I can't imagine there is any explanation for how a murderer on the level of Bucky Barnes would be allowed to freely walk amongst the population. Regardless of the fact that he was Manchurian candidated, he still killed a ton of people. I like Bucky. I like seeing Sebastian Stan in the MCU, but I will never be able to buy he can just go get some baby back ribs at his local Chili's whenever he wants to. This could have been handled differently. This should have been handled differently.
Actually, not necessarily. In real life, when murderers are found to be controlled in some way, they are often sent to asylums or other places like that instead of just being locked up, and they can be released after having seen enough improvement. Bucky has gotten rid of the mind control from his time in Wakanda, so he's clearly improved quite a bit. Also, are we really forgetting the fact that this universe is not the same as ours? So the fact that Discount Jeremy is trying to equate real-life logic to certain situations is bullshit.
Try the whole online dating thing. It's pretty crazy.
Also, there's that whole "you're a former hitman for Hydra" thing. Perhaps remove the part of your profile that reads
Skip.
Speaking of that, why does no one recognize Bucky? I know when he was Winter Soldiering, he had the half mask, but there have been pictures of him in newspapers without the mask. I'm not saying he's Tom Cruise trying to walk down the street in peace, but Sam, out of Falcon gear, and Torres had some random guy walk up to them and call them Avengers. If there are strangers that know Torres, there's surely plenty of people who would recognize Bucky.
I mean, not necessarily. You already pointed out that Bucky was pretty much always disguised during his assassinations, but as for his picture being everywhere, that was quite a few years ago. Plus, it was only really some crappy security cam footage of part of his face.
Keep a couple games around for boring shifts.
And I picked up Battleship, and I swear it has nothing to do with your previous connection to war or any thematic ideas of subterfuge that the show we're on is playing with.
Sinning cool little details like this is really stupid.
There's no word for someone whose kids die.
It is fairly recent, but the Sanskrit word vilama has come into usage. It means against the natural order of things, and though I could add a sin for the show not mentioning this, I'd rather this be a sin for the type of grief that I can't even imagine and no one should have to experience.
Isn't that literally the point that the show is trying to make? And another thing, pointing out the Sanskrit word is dumb because they're clearly speaking in English, you dipshit.
Torres survives this.
I mean, yeah, they have super strength, but one punch still isn't enough to kill somebody. Seriously, did you really think that one punch should have killed him?